Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Card Blitz. This is episode 39. I'm your host, Kelly Reed, and I'm joined by my special guest, Jason Hill. Jason, how's it going?
Oh, it's great to be here, Kelly Reed. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Jason, I met you via the Facebook pages from our brothers over at Stream of Card Consciousness. And then when we got this Card Blitz thing going, you were like one of the first ones that said, "Hey, I'm in. Let's make this happen." And you've been like contributing so much content to that Facebook page, and it's a real joy just to be here with you and to collab with you on this episode.
Um, Kelly, the feeling is mutual. I really need to thank you, salute you, the guys at Stream of Car Consciousness too. Giving collectors like myself this vehicle on Facebook, these baseball card groups, these car groups that you guys facilitate, is so important. Like when the world gets me down, I can always turn to vintage baseball cards, and to have a place I can go and just meet other collectors like yourself and talk about this stuff is so meaningful. For me, it's really kind of advanced my understanding, appreciation of the hobby, and I would be doing it in isolation other than card shows. So I really, you guys have my utmost respect for what you're doing here. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the kind words and talking about fellowship. I'm always curious to know like collectors and their journey. So, if you don't mind sharing with me and some of the viewers here, how did you get into cards and tell us a little bit about your story? Because I'm curious too.
Okay, cool. Probably similar in a lot of ways to a lot of other guys my age. I was born in 71 in Chicago. My father moved us to Cincinnati in 73, which was a good time to get with the big red machine. I was awfully young. I barely remember 1976 and our monster season that year. What I remember most, my first baseball memory is really George Foster in 77 hitting 52 home runs and whatnot. Kind of the tail end of that big red machine is when I became aware of sports. My mother was a big baseball fan from her childhood, and she passed that on to me. I bought my first packs of baseball cards in 1978 at a little kind of local convenience store called United Dairy Farmers, or UDF, that we have in Cincinnati. And I can still remember kind of the magic of ripping open these little, kind of felt like a little Christmas present to see
Right.
what mysteries were inside, and to see a Cincinnati Red pop out of that pack, or an All-Star card. In 78, the All-Star cards had that great shield, that All-Star shield, or the gold rookie cup or whatever. That hooked me like from the beginning. So I bought packs, as many as I could afford with my lawnmower money or whatever, from like 78 to 86. 1985, I think, was the first year I tried to complete the entire top set, just by buying packs. And I got every card that year except Darryl Strawberry. I had like triples, quadruples of every card, but I couldn't get Darryl Strawberry. I never forget that. I remember the excitement in 81 of all of a sudden you had Fleer and Don Russ on the shelves too. So now we had more options. So as chintzy and low budget as those sets were, like, I view them very fondly till today. But about 86, like now I'm well into high school. I started getting interested in whiskey and women, and I moved away from my childhood baseball card collecting. And when I went off to school, I sold my collection for like beer money or whatever. And I forgot all about baseball cards for about 30 years there. Moved on with my life. Once in a while, I'd pass by a card shop, and I could feel the old pull. So I've always kind of been addicted to cards. But I didn't even buy a card or think about cards much until sometime in 2019. I was in a little hobby shop here in my now hometown of Bayonne, New Jersey, and he was selling unopened packs of 1988 Don Russ, which I was thinking must cost a fortune. I had missed that whole junk era,
Right.
and the packs were like a buck each. So it's like, awesome, let me buy some packs of baseball cards. And ripping open those packs of junk era cards, it brought the whole thing back to me. The compulsion came back with a vengeance, and I have replaced my childhood collection and much more ever since then. Been having a great time with it. So, and that really proliferated during the pandemic. Like, I think a lot of guys my age. I've got some disposable cash now that I not did not have when I was a kid, and I've invested heavily in baseball cards. So in a nutshell, that's my story. I'm sure it's not much different than a lot of guys our age.
No, I was gonna say, I think a lot of us, refer to that nostalgia and the euphoric experiences of our youth with opening up packs of cards, and then yeah, we grow up and we have, and it's not saying that we're getting away from cards because we've grown up. It's just life happens, and then you have other priorities, and it's a hobby, and then you get to come back into this hobby as you reflect on it. You're like, you know what? I enjoyed this, and this when I have free time, I want to participate in this hobby.
Yeah. It gives I need to live a life that has meaning and purpose. It can't just be about my job, and especially if my job isn't always giving me meaning and purpose. What gives me meaning and purpose? This hobby, history, baseball, a game that I think is beautiful, this long, rich history that it has, connection to nostalgia, my roots, and other guys who share this interest. It all gives my life a meaning and purpose that it wouldn't have otherwise. So it's not just to me, it's not just some little childhood pastime. It's a very rich and meaningful thing.
Well, one of the speaking of this Facebook groups and this journey of yours and ours as collectors, you started posting on Stream of Card Consciousness, their Facebook page, and now on the CardBlitz one about the like on this day I remember, and you posted one of your childhood heroes in the Big Red Machine, right? And
Joe Morgan.
that's when I reached out. I was like, this Joe Morgan, for me, that and you mentioned the Joe Foreman and then the George Foster card and that 78 tops. I was like, well, hey man, we got to partner up. Let's talk Joe Morgan. Share with us, you like your collection, and do you consider yourself like a super collector of Joe Morgan?
Super collector of cards, definitely. I would say. There's probably guys out there that get into the bats and the balls and the autographs and the jerseys in a way that I haven't. I'm a social worker, so I have limited income. So I have to kind of pick my battles with collecting. So I try not to have mission creep and get off into the other memorabilia other than some posters for the man cave here or whatever. But it's mostly just cards. But for Joe Morgan cards, I think you might call me like a super collector at this point. He was the most valuable player of one of the most incredible teams of all time when I was a kid. And my first jersey was a Joe Morgan gray road jersey, Cincinnati Reds. So he's always been my favorite player of all time. He's a guy who did everything well, as evidenced by his WAR, which really captures all aspects of a guy's game, plus his longevity. One of the few players in baseball history that's accumulated 100 WAR. On the all-time leaderboard with walks and steals, got himself into scoring position all by himself a lot. If it's possible, I think that he might be a little underrated, Joe Morgan. So for a lot of reasons, he's my favorite. And so years ago, I dedicated myself to getting my hands on every card of his that I could, specifically an SGC 9 or above. SGC is my favorite grading company. I love the look of the black tuxes. It's a little less expensive sometimes while everyone else is chasing PSA graded cards. And I wanted to have one collection that was really high grade. So, at this point, I have dozens and dozens of Joe Morgan cards in SGC 9 or above, going back even to his rookie card, 1965. So I think you've seen a picture of my collection. I posted it on Facebook. I might qualify as a Joe Morgan SGC super collector for baseball cards at this point. Yeah, it's one of my little
Do you have
obsessions.
any idea of how many Joe Morgan cards you have that are raw or graded?
Um, I do
Do you have
have
like a
a lot.
spreadsheet and you keep track of them, or?
Yeah, I do. I have an Excel spreadsheet for all my graded cards. I have more raw cards in general than graded cards because I have a lot of complete sets. But SGC graded Joe Morgan cards 9 or above, you know, it's got to be 100 or more at this point with very few duplicates.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also collecting, the modern day Tops and Don Russ and Panini. They'll put out an homage to Joe Morgan in their set these days, and if I can get those and get them highly graded by SGC, I collect those as well. So it just goes on and on and on and on, way past his playing days.
And then I would assume you have some of them on display in your room, in your man cave, and it's probably like a breath of fresh air when you walk in there and you can kind of see like one of those childhood idols that you looked up to, heroes, and you say, this is what makes me happy.
Yeah. Um, yeah. As you can see here, I'm kind of surrounded here in my little man cave by Reds cards and posters and stuff, and this is my happy place. My wife tolerates it here down in the basement. I try not to make it too cluttered. It's kind of insane, but it reminds me of my boyhood bedroom at home that was festooned with posters from floor to ceiling, and yeah, I just feel surrounded and comfortable. It's a feast for the eyes for me. It's like walking into a great vintage card shop or an antique store where there's just buried treasure everywhere. Is kind of how it feels to me.
Dude, that is so awesome. Have you had the pleasure and joy of meeting Mr. Morgan?
I did once, actually. In the 1990s, I worked for the New York Daily News selling advertising, and we sponsored the Major League Baseball Players Association annual gala dinner in Midtown Manhattan. It's kind of a fancy affair, and I got to go one year, and they sat a major leaguer or two at our tables for dinner, and there were speeches. And this one year that I went, Joe Morgan was called to the podium, and he gave a speech. And I briefly shook his hand, and you know, I was very nervous and kind of tripping over myself. And it looked like I made him a little bit nervous. You know what I mean? I went into the little, my memories of his batting stance
Right.
and talking the arm, and he was just kind of like, "All right, pal, nice to meet you." I came on strong to my hero Joe Morgan, as I remember. Didn't get his autograph or anything.
Do you have many of his autographs, like certified or raw copies?
Nothing raw, but I do have some of the top certified cards they've been releasing over the last 25 years or so, where they have a certified autograph on a good looking card. And I have several of those, graded SGC 9 or above. Yeah. I'm not, to me, because I love kind of the beauty and aesthetic of a well-designed baseball card. I've always felt like an autograph kind of ruins a good looking card often. So I don't chase autos the way that a lot of collectors do, just for aesthetic reasons. I'm kind of weird that way. So I'm not chasing Joe Morgan autos, but I do have several of them, if the card looks good.
Right, right. I completely understand where you're coming from. When I was growing up, you didn't want to deface or devalue, those classic cards. And so, finding the Kmart card or like maybe a league leader card or something like that that wasn't as valuable. If you had the opportunity to get the autograph, you would use that or like a photo and have him sign the photo. So I know where you're coming from with that. How about baseballs? Do you have a Joe Morgan autograph baseball for your collection?
I do not. In fact, I don't think I have a single autographed baseball in my collection. Again, like collecting on a budget as I do, I really try to stay within certain parameters. If I let this obsession creep, I'll be out of house and home. So
The missus might
don't
not be so happy, right? So yeah, definitely.
don't
Well, let's segue into that, man. You brought up budget, and obviously, I have not won the Texas state lottery yet or the national lottery, so I've got to keep going to work like everyone else. But when it comes to a budget, that's something that affects me, and I'm sure many other collectors in this hobby. What's your perspective? Like, how do you approach collecting on a budget?
yeah. Um with real vintage cards that need to be graded, buying SGC instead of PSA will save me money sometimes, plus I think it looks better and their grading standards used to be higher than PSA. So that's a win-win for me. I'll collect the players that are kind of second tier. Like while everyone else is chasing Mickey Mantle or Jackie Robinson, I'll be chasing a Larry Doby or a Warren Spahn or a Frank Robinson. The guys that don't command the kind of premium prices, so I can collect to my heart's content and save a little bit of money. I also like to collect commons from sets that I find just visually appealing and beautiful,
Hmm.
so that saves me some money. I don't have to go after the stars. I just appreciate a really beautifully done baseball card, even if it's a so-called common. And then, the red, just trying to stay in my lane, stick to collecting reds. I collect reds vintage team sets. And so luckily that means I'm not spending nearly as much money as the guy that's collecting Yankee vintage team sets. I don't have to chase a Babe Ruth card or a Lou Gehrig or a Joe DiMaggio card. I'm going after my Reds, and they tend to be a lot less expensive, until you get to the 1960s or so.
Do you feel like when it comes to the modern game, modern cards, that is, do you feel like because you like collecting the retro Reds players on those modern cards, is that a pretty affordable endeavor on your end?
Um, yeah. Um, I will. It depends on how you define affordable, I
Uh,
guess,
Good point. Good
Sometimes I
point.
go too far and I blow my budget and I got to cool it, for a few weeks. That happened to me at the Philly card show just a few weeks ago. I've had to cool it. But like I'll collect some modern cards, but like I'm a sucker for the Topps heritage designs because it reminds me of the Topps designs from when I was a kid. I'll get some modern players like that way. Sometimes I have to go raw instead of graded to save some money. You know, um, hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I was thinking specifically, if you think of like the stars of the Big Red Machine when you were growing up, and let's say that they're released in the 2025, 2024 products, things that when you got back in the hobby starting in 2019, when you look
Right.
at those cards, those players, you know, players that you watched growing up, but now that they've retired, but they're being remembered on these cards in modern sets. Are
Right.
those usually, like in the value boxes, or, do you find them on eBay affordably, or
Yeah. Those are not chase cards these days, unless they're autographed. Those aren't amazingly expensive. And honestly, I don't go after tons of those except for Joe Morgan, you
hmm
know, or like a modern day autograph on a reprint of a vintage card that I just think is beautiful. Like the 76 Topps Johnny Bench card with him standing there surrounded by dust, looking like a gunslinger. He's just throwing at
right?
a guy at second base. It's a classic, iconic card. 1976 Topps Johnny Bench. This year's Topps Heritage was an homage to 1976 Topps, and they included some Johnny Bench autographed cards, of that image, the autograph in red too. I've been chasing those on eBay, and those go for a few $100, like a pretty penny, So once in a while, I'll chase that. But like, they're just printing money at this point. Like Topps, if I chased every vintage Reds player in a modern day set, like it's never ending. There's no end to it. So I try to stay kind of within my lane. Joe Morgan, yeah, I'll go after all of those I can. But the other Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Tony Perez, the other guys, like I have to let it slide sometimes.
You kind of pick and choose your battles. Then I hear you. As far as other aspects of the budget, do you find yourself, and I'm sure you probably collaborate with the wife on this, but do you have like a set budget? And you're like, hey, spend X amount per month, and therefore these are my lanes I can operate in, or how do you work with that parameter?
It's not easy for me. I tend to be an extremist in almost everything I do. So working within a budget is not exactly easy for me. The primary way I've tried to control it is I have a one particular credit card with a relatively low credit line, and I try to keep that as my designated baseball card credit card. You know what I mean? So when
Right.
that's maxed out, it's time to stop buying cards for the month.
So for new collectors or those that are kind of just getting back in the hobby, if they stumble upon this channel and our show, uh, what advice would you give them if they're getting back into this hobby or just getting into it and they're like, hey, This whole budget thing, everyone talks about it. What words of advice would you share with them?
Establish a couple strict parameters. Pick your favorite things to collect, whether it's sets or players or graded or raw or whatever. Just pick a couple and stick to that, and don't, try not to get pulled anywhere else. You know.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, in today's modern game versus like, mid 90s, early 90s, junk wax era as they call it. You have so many different sets coming out starting in like 92 basically. With your low end, mid end, high end. And then even today, the game is different than in card collecting than it was back then. Uh, it's easy, you can't have it all. So, like you said, you got to kind of select what you want to collect, how you want to collect it, and be laser focused on that collection, right?
Right. Yeah, like with the modern sets, if I really like the Topps Heritage design that year, I'll complete that set. Or once in a while, the modern top sets have just a great design. I think, they're getting kind of generic in general, but once in a while, the base set will have a great looking design, and I'll get that complete set. But I'm not, you know, you start spinning off into Don Russ, Panini, all the other, Tops has a multitude of variations. I got to keep it to one or two.
Right. I was gonna say, for Topps Heritage this year, you've referenced 76 and that design, which I believe is truly awesome. That's the first modern set that I've tried to put together since probably like '02. And I think part of it is because it's the 25th like anniversary or the 25th year of that release of that card set. Do you find yourself if you're trying to complete that set, the high numbers on that are pretty, I don't want to say super expensive, but there's just so many. It's like 100 short print cards.
Yeah.
It can hit the your budget pretty hard. How do you try to find those cards in the value boxes, or do you try to trade with other collectors? What do you do to keep it on the affordable level?
This is a good question. I'm right now in the process of um, building a complete set of 2014 Topps Heritage, which is a throwback to the 1965 Topps design, which I think is beautiful. The pennant, the flag
Mhm.
on it, and getting every single card from Topps Heritage that year, it's impossible. Basically, there's so many chase cards and variants and different kinds of chrome cards. And I use baseballcardpedia.com as my website for a checklist for
Mhm.
these modern day sets. And it's endless. Not only do you have the base set, then you have the short prints, which you reference, but then on top of that, you've got all kinds of auto cards and little subsets. It's impossible to get every single card because some of them are one of one. It's impossible to get
Right.
them
A
all. So,
master set is impossible, but just to
right.
complete the set, minus like, hey, all 10 different variations of that card, but just have
Yeah.
just a complete set is, do you find that to be a challenge with that 2014 set?
Yeah, what I do is I'll have the base set. I'll collect the short prints. I'll collect the high numbers, and I collect them in nice binders. So if I have just one binder page of some of these expensive mini variants or whatever, that's enough. I just want to have an example of each of the subsets. Maybe I'll complete one 9 sleeve binder page and
Right, like a
not all
type set
18 or
collector.
27 or 30 or 40 of them or whatever, just to keep it affordable. And I'll have one binder page of autos, 9 autos, not 50 or whatever.
And then you have
That's what
that
I
reference point in your collection, and you go, oh, yeah, that year 2014, here's my base set, here's my high numbers. And by the way, here's a type of each of the inserts. And you can
right,
enjoy the card set for what it is then.
right. Me personally, when in 1971, when Top started introducing action shots into their
Hmm.
sets, I love action shots on baseball cards, love them. And so if a modern set has the action variation of a base card, I make sure to get all the action variations too, and I'll put them on the front of the binder, and then I'll have the portrait behind that So you see it when you turn the binder page over. That's what I do with my modern day complete sets. Got to have the action variations.
Yeah. Do you have the 71 Thurman Munson, like the initial iconic action shot card?
Just recently, so iconic card. I mean, the card is perfect. Everything about it. 71 design, the gold cup, dust flying, play at the
Right.
plate. I
With
mean,
live photography. Yes.
yeah, much better than his rookie card the year before, in my opinion, which often happens with tops. Um, the second year card is a much better looking card than those multiplayer cards the year before. I recently here's another one of my fetishes is 1971 O-Pee-Chee. I
Hmm.
think 1971 is the one year that the Canadian O-Pee-Chee version is actually superior to Topps because of the yellow back, especially in an SGC slab. The black and yellow is beautiful. So just recently, I spent too much money on a Thurman Munson O-Pee-Chee from 1971 in a SGC fairly high grade slab. Had to have it.
Well,
Yeah,
one, either
had to
you
have
got to
it.
send me a picture of this, or two, you got to come back on this show and you got to show me this card, man. You piqued my interest. I'd like to see it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been going after the O-Pee-Chee recently, and I'll send it a raw one. If I can get it in really good condition and I think it'll grade like 6 or above, I'll send it into SGC. Not easy to get 6, 7 or above on 71 O-Pee-Chee.
Well, and that's another affordable way to to build up your collection, right? Doing the raw thing.
That's right.
Well, speaking of beautiful cards and iconic cards, we had talked about perhaps getting to like some of the more beautiful card sets designed over the years. And, as the saying is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And you're going to have probably different set designs than I selected, vice versa, and probably what our viewers of this CardBlitz show are into. But certainly, let's get into that, man. Let's talk about like your like three of your favorites, and I'll talk about three of my favorites, and kind of go from there then.
Cool. Very hard to pick only three because there's so many beautiful sets throughout history.
Oh, and do you
Um,
have samples of the three that you want to get into?
I do. I got a few sitting right here.
Okay, cool, cool.
I would start with number one on my list would have to be the 1911 T3 Turkey Red cabinets set. Tobacco cards, oversized. I'm a weird collector. I love oversized cards. For some reason, they don't get as much love as what's become kind of the top standard size. I love oversized cards. Another way that I save some money. So I've got my favorite looking Turkey Red card here. It's a common. Art Fromm, who was a pitcher on my Reds back in the dead ball era, but I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that with the
wow. Yeah,
with the
like that
glare.
right there. That is beautiful, man. That is
His
sweet.
T3, he's got that cool uniform. Kind of reminds me of the modern day City Connect Reds uniforms that are all black. He's all blue and red. And in the background, you can see, I imagine that smokestacks from one of the, you know,
Factories nearby.
yeah, or one of the river boats on the Ohio River that
Ah.
people used to use a lot, like back then or whatever, because the stadium is right on the river, the Palace of the Fans at that time. So this is just a gorgeous work of art. I mean, superior to anything hanging in the Louvre, like in my opinion. And these are pricey, so I can't do much outside of my Reds from this set,
Right.
and the higher grades. Once you get into PSA 4 or 5, they'll kill you. But I just have to have them. They're just so gorgeous. By the way, this is one of the few sets that I prefer PSA because I think they look better in the PSA slab. The way SGC slabs these, sometimes you get some moisture in their
Oh,
bag. It doesn't look quite right. But yeah,
now that's a sweet
I adore
card.
this card.
Jason, that
Yep,
thing is awesome, man.
yep. Um, Here's one that I've fallen in love with. A lot of serious vintage collectors will agree with me. It's one of the most gorgeous of all time. In 1909, 1910, and 1911, you had a cigarette company out west called Obax that released sets of Pacific Coast League and Northwestern League players. At that
Mhm.
time, you only had major leagues in the east side of the country, but they had professional baseball out there, pretty high quality, in a time where travel wasn't easy and baseball had spread out there. You had a legit league, professional league out there, Pacific Coast League, Northwestern League, and they released this set, these sets of cards, which kind of are akin or similar to the more famous T206 cards. These are only minor leaguers, so they're all commons for the most part, so much more affordable. But the paintings, there's all these gorgeous sunsets, at a time where there's no lights in a baseball game. So sunset was serious, man. It's crunch time. We got to win this game, the sun's setting. And then all these beautiful little structures with flags and stands in the background, some great poses and colors. These sets are just chock full of gorgeous paintings, design cards that
That's an
I've
awesome
fallen in love
card,
with.
Jason. Wow.
Yeah, these are relatively rare, but not that they've increased in price over the last few years if people have discovered this set. But this is just in terms of aesthetic beauty, this has
Hmm.
got to be right up there, I think, the most beautiful sets of all time. Um, my third one, I got a regional set that I adore that's more obscure, or I got my favorite top set. Which one should I talk about, do you think?
Uh, yeah, yeah, you're on the hot seat, so you choose.
Let me do the more obscure one. 1956 tops, by the way, I think is the most beautiful top set. A lot of collectors agree. Gorgeous portraits, action paintings, beautiful design, little oversized, gorgeous set. But this is a set
Wow.
that's well known amongst vintage Reds collectors. In 1938, 1939, the Reds were a very good team. They would win the pennant in 39, get swept by the Yankees, came right back the next year, 1940, and beat the Tigers in 7 games in the World Series. So this is a very good team. And to help commemorate this team, this local dairy in Cincy called French Bower put out these cards. It's a beautiful, like kind of colorized black and white photo. A lot of beautiful action shots, like the high leg kick on Paul Derringer, who won Game 7 in the 1940 World Series, with this kind of gorgeous orange reddish nameplate at the bottom. And this set is perfect, in my opinion, because it's relatively rare, still pretty cheap because it's kind of obscure. Really, only Reds collectors are into this. So a challenge to collect, but not too expensive, and a very challenging checklist to even figure out who's in the set, because this little company did all kinds of wonky things, like they put out the same image both years with a different back. So is this card from 38 or 39? Hard to
So you
tell.
have to know the back, right?
Sometimes you have the same front and back. Sometimes you have one guy in the 38 set, but not the 39 set. So as far as I can tell, 38 set has like 24 cards, I think. And then the next year is 27 cards. And then the 39 set has one card that, as far as I can tell, there's only 5 of them on Earth. Only one ever graded by PSA or SGC, Wesley Livingood. So there's a white whale in this set too that guys like me can dream about. But maybe I've never even laid eyes on one in person. I've seen a photograph of it. So to me, this is like the perfect set. Hometown team, beautiful design, relatively rare, challenging to collect, but not that expensive. Perfect.
That is a beautiful card, Jason. Wow. Man. You seem to focus more on like the pre-war side of things for your beautiful sets. I went more into like the 50s in the early 60s. So for me, my number three is the 56 design
Oh yeah,
with the action shot
absolutely.
and yeah,
The
the dual.
colors, the layout,
Hmm.
you got the beautiful portrait and the action in the same card. Some guy took the time to paint all these beautiful paintings, man. That is an amazing set.
Definitely. And my number two on this, it just reminds me of the 60s, and that's the 1960 tops design. I just
Landscape, yeah, colorful
it's,
landscape. The All-Star subset in that 1960 set, I'm obsessed with. Beautiful All-Star cards.
and Jason, one of the things that you and I both have in common with the appreciation of these designs is art. And I think that's represented here with like this 53 tops baseball set, man. I mean, just it's art. It was hand drawn and painted and wow, I love these cards. I think they're amazing, and they are a bit oversized, but not as oversized as some of that
Right.
1911 and stuff. So,
What's the? I can't see the grade on that. What's the grade on that one?
It's a 4,
Sweet. Mid grade, perfect. You got
right?
Campy with the big smile in his MVP year, 1953. That's a great card.
When
Look
I
at
see
that.
this card, I smile because that
Yeah.
smile makes me smile. That's what
Look
this
at that.
hobby is about, man. It's just enjoying these beautiful cards, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
As I say, and then in the modern era, I went with this because you mentioned action photography, and I just the stadium clubs from like the 90s with the
Uh-huh.
color. I mean, they had stepped up their game because Upper Deck stepped up theirs, and this was Topps response. And so for me, just the full bleed photography, and then on the back has some cool verbiage. Now the stats part they could probably have improved on, but they have limited space. But again, if I'm
Yeah.
looking at the fronts, definitely I
Yeah.
think the photography in the modern era, this Top Stadium Club has carried the torch.
Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, things are better now than they were in the old days. Not everything was better in the old days. And one area I would agree is photography, Topps photography. There's some classic photos here and there in the vintage sets, but these days and those early 90s Stadium Club sets, I have a couple of those complete, just photograph after photograph capturing players in actions beautifully, shot photos all over the place in modern sets. Fantastic photography. Often, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jason, it's been a pleasure, man. We are up against it with about 30 seconds left in this episode. It's been a real pleasure having you on, and it's an honor, man. I enjoy doing this, and we got to do this again, man. We got to talk cards again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you want, I'm down to talk baseball cards every day of the week.
Excellent. Well, hey, have a great Sunday, and we'll catch up with you later.
You too, Kelly Reed. Be good.
Yes, sir.